number of positions on certain key issues. Copies of both these reports are here today, and I'm delighted to present them to the Minister. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in inviting Minister Guedes, Minister of the Economy of the Federative Republic of Brazil, to the stage. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here, say a few words about the Brazilian economy and how we are thinking of following what we called in the presidential program, the road to prosperity. Well, not by coincidence, we put together the road to serfdom of Hayek and prosperity through competition. Ludwig Erhard, the liberal guy who rebuilt Germany after the Second World War. So Brazil, for the last 40 years, observed the continuous increase of public expenditures as a ratio of GDP. This trend of uncontrolled public spending was very tragic to the end of the military government, because we jumped in a sequence of exchange rate crises, one after the other. We were overborrowing abroad, the recycling of petrodollars at the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, to expand public expenditures through state companies. The military were doing a great work in infrastructure, but they were moving quite ahead of our financial capabilities. So we had a huge set of state companies like Petrobras, Telebras, Eletrobras, Siderbras, Nucleabras, Portobras, and all these guys investing, trying to push growth. It worked for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, but exactly like in Soviet Union, after a while, this centralized system loses intelligence, has no flexibility, and collapses by the corruption of the political system and stagnation, which is exactly what happened to our emerging democracy. So when the military moved out, the redemocratization began. We began allocating public funds to health, education, the usual requirements of an emerging democracy, the usual requirements of social expenditures of an emerging democracy. But we were trapped, and our democracy was trapped by the same trap that eventually ashamed the military at the end of their government. They did a great job creating Brazilian infrastructure, and at the end, we had recurrent exchange rate crisis and inflation going higher. Then, as soon as we redemocratized the country, we went to hyperinflation. The civil government now own mistakes of spending again public expenditures all the time, health, education, and anything, without really transforming the economy. So the expansion, uncontrolled expansion of public spending for 40 years, from 18%, 20%, 25%, 30%, 35% to 45%, produced the sequence of exchange rate crisis, hyperinflation bursts, and now recently, what we might call a trap of snowball internal indebtedness. So just for having an idea, we pay every year on interest on internal debt $100 billion, which is the Marshall Plan in present value. So the money that was used to rebuild Europe in the 8 years after war, Brazil rebuilds one Europe every year, just as a paradise of rentists and hell to entrepreneurs. Very high interest rates, very high taxes. So during 30 to 40 years, uncontrollable public spending forced us to increase tax, to pay very high interest rates, And eventually, we corrupted our democratic system and we stagnated the economy. So a state-centered economy corrupted our democracy and stagnated the economy. The president is a change in these two axes, very important axes. The economic axis, the president was elected with less than $1 million. It was a disruption of social networks against the establishment. Political parties, conventional media, exactly like it happened with Trump here, happened with President Bolsonaro in Brazil. Talking straight to the people through the social media, spending less than $1 million against candidates that spent more than $100 million, he won. And he won on a platform. First, his personal attributes of leadership, of determination, integrity, transparency, and the resolve that is the mark of great leadership. But it was a very interesting thing because it showed a vibrant democracy, quite different from what you guys probably read through conventional media here, because you've been hearing to the established media, the conventional media that represents the establishment. Quite contrary, our democracy was never at risk. The president has a 30 years experience inside our Congress. And he refused to play the game that contaminated our politics. So we are changing two axes. One is the political axis. Instead of being in retail politics, buying political support, using state companies to trade places in the political arena, the thing now is thematic. The president won based on great principles and values. Principles and values. So it was an alliance of conservatives and liberals, center-right. After 30 years of left, it is center-right, the political alliance around the president. It is an alliance around principles and values. It's not around money. It's not around political purchasing of support. And on that ground also, it was an amazing thing that happened in Brazil to show the resilience of the political system, is that we had three independent powers. When the legislative declared its independence and made an impeachment at the right and then at the left, the executive tried to buy parliamentary support. And then they awakened the judiciary power as the third independent power that put in jail the guy who bought and the guy who sold. Which means that we have a very vibrant democratic system with checks and balances of independent powers. And when even the media fell in love with the establishment, it was disrupted because people wanted to change in a democratic system, voting every 2 years openly. So Brazil is a very vibrant democracy, very stable. The president knows that. The president knows exactly where it failed. Is giving full support to our reforms, and this alliance of conservatives in customs, principles, and values with the liberals in the economy is our music. So two axes. First axis, the politics is changing, a new politics is around values and principles, and the second axis is the economic axis. And then it's our part, which is first reform after public expenditures reached 45% of GDP. You go there and you see the most uncontrollable spending, the black hole, really the black hole that is swallowing Brazilian public finance. Social Security. It's a pay-as-you-go finance. Brazil is already spending 10% of GDP even before the population aged. So you have 11% of aged population spending 10% of GDP. In Japan, it's 40% of aged population spending 10% of GDP. So we are breaking the system even before the population got aged. It's unavoidable. We must attack it. We attacked it on very wise grounds in the sense that whoever makes more is paying more. We are, in a certain sense, recognizing that social security is a principle like no man will be left behind, no Brazilian will be left behind, but not a factory of privileges like our social security was, where a politician could get retired making 20 times more than the ordinary citizen. So the men who wrote the law, the men who legislate, were writing for themselves and against the people. So we changed it and we made a proposition. The president, with 2 months of government, 10 days he spent on the hospital. And 30 days the Congress was not there, because the Congress, he is inaugurated in 1st of January, but the Congress gets there 1st of February. And the president spent 10 days in the hospital. So in less than 60 days, in 40, 45 days, the president sent to the Congress 2 very important reforms. One, anti-crime, because Brazil had a lot of violence, and this was one of the thematic subjects that gave him a lot of votes. Brazilian people were losing citizens at a rate of 60,000 a year. It's one Vietnam War a year. So think of Brazil losing one Vietnam War of citizens a year to violence. And then rebuilding one Europe a year, paying interest in a snowball indebtedness because nobody had balls to control public spending. So we got a guy that has balls. So he got elected because he's facing straight to these problems. The lack of principles, the need to control public spending, and he said it openly. And people around the campaign were saying, well, but he has bad manners because he's too tough. Well, but he has great principles. There were a lot of people there with good manners and very bad principles. And the Brazilians understood that and voted massively for President Bolsonaro. So in less than 60 days, he sent an anti-crime bill and the Social Security Reform Bill. Well, this is the most important public expenditures, but it is not just about changing the future path or trajectory of Social Security expenditures. It's more than that. It's a change of regime. Instead of a pay-as-you-go finance that is condemned, you guys will have to think about that very soon in the U.S. too. But you already have the 301k, which gives you the chance to accumulate. But certainly you'll have to take a look at your Social Security very soon in the future, because it doesn't make sense increasing promises and selling dreams for the future if you don't accumulate funds. A pay-as-you-go finance is a time bomb. So we are changing from a pay-as-you-go finance to a capitalization regime. There is a transition cost. That's why it's a very potent fiscal reform that we sent. And everybody is in it. The president had the courage, the bravery of requiring everybody to be in there. So the military are there, the civil governments are there, the women are paying the price. And now we have a problem now is, if you want to give more to the woman, you have to take somebody else. The military. If you want to give to the military and the woman, you have to take from the rural people. Or we are not brave enough to save our children. We have to choose. Either we pay the price to make the transition, or we have not the courage and we stay trapped and we take our kids and grandsons to the same trap. So the president had the courage and bravery to support, and we sent it to the Congress. We know his personal preferences, but he rise up to his responsibilities. And he gave us full support to send this first great reform. The second major expenditure in public accounts in Brazil is exactly what I said about interest rates. We spend €1, the reconstruction of €1 every year. We can't just observe that and doing nothing. So we must do like any company does, sell assets, pay back debt, reduce your future trajectory of interest expenditures. We made the first calculations. There was a time 30 years ago I prepared, that was helping a liberal candidate for the presidency. and I prepared a full privatization scheme at the time. Very impressed with the Chilean experiment. At that time, we sold all the stakes of the government in the state companies. We would zero the internal debt, which means that we could have had 30 years of very low interest rates, very high growth, very easy budgets for health, education, and everything else. Because we didn't do it, the debt escalated to 4 trillion, and the value of the public companies today, which was about the same size, now is just 20%, 25%, 22% of what it was. So if we take 10 more years to do the changes and privatize and reduce debt, 10 years from now, probably it's 1%. So we lost our assets because the cost of carrying those assets is not paid by the profitability. And worse than that, not only the public companies, the state companies are not working efficiently, but they are also preventing and crowding out the private investment. So we find lots of state companies that do not invest, are real nests of political corruption, and prevent the private investments from moving in. So we crowded out for 30 years private investments. And public investments collapsed by the very own weight of the budget. So we used to invest 15% of GDP in infrastructure. As public expenditures moved from 18, 20% to 45%, public investment in infrastructure collapsed to 1.5%, from 15 to 1.5%. So there we are now with huge problems in infrastructure. The Chinese want to move in, of course, because we have mining, iron ore, minerals, we have a huge agricultural frontier, we have oil and gas, we are complementary. So they are moving in, trying to invest, and we are looking to our partner here and saying, well, what should we do? The president loves the Americans, me too, of course, studied here. Love Disneyland, Coca-Cola, jeans. They don't believe in Santa Claus. Here you believe in Santa Claus. There is always a happy end. You guys got together around values by the time of the Great Depression, and the media helped you guys to create the American dream. So we are at a moment like that. We have to create the Brazilian dream. This is exactly what the president did during the campaign. Brazil is above all interests. Let's not ask what each one of us can get out of Brazil, but let's ask what we can give to Brazil. So it is a very important moment down there. It's a vibrant democracy. We have a very, very tough economic program in the right direction. All news will be good news for the business community, because even the Social Security reform, which is very tough, is a promise of future growth, because we will be democratizing saving, teaching kids to have their own investment accounts, individual investment accounts, instead of just jumping in public budget and relying on the public sector to pay for their old age. So they will be stimulated, they can move, they will have mobility to transfer funds from one manager to the other. So it's a great time, great promise of future growth. And this is only the bad news. The bad news is growth ahead. Growth ahead. And the good news is reduction and simplification of taxes, opening the economy, privatizing the economy. 50% of public employees will retire in the next 5 to 6 years. Guess what? We will not rehire them. If they retire, we'll digitalize and we'll let the state economy shrink. And more than that, we will decentralize political power. No president could have, and our president is an example of that. One of our past presidents used it to like one particular soccer team. Immediately a stadium with 40,000 people popped up. Then the president looked at two countries he liked, like Cuba and Venezuela, and immediately popped up one port in one country, and in the other country he spent 20 billion reals, which is around $5 billion, $5.5–6 billion, to make a JV of a refining of oil. We spend 10 times the budget, and you see nothing there. At the same time, this very same president and his political group looked at one particular entrepreneur in the protein value chain and transformed him in 5 years in the largest protein company in the world. They bought 2 or 3 here of you guys with public money from Brazil. So no president should have that power. Political power has to be limited and decentralized. You solved this problem 200 years ago with your founding fathers. We are not still there. We are still moving in that direction. It's very funny, one Brazilianist, Maxwell, is an American, New York-based, working, telling stories about Brazil, about your independence. Little after your independence, we tried also to get rid of the Portuguese domain there, and we used to write to you Americans and say, listen, help us. We are wealthier than you. We used Benjamin Franklin, who was in France, as a communication channel to get to the founding fathers here, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson and Hamilton, all the guys, the great guys. You had a wonderful generation that shaped the future of the country. So we used to send messages saying, listen, guys, we are wealthier than you. You have tobacco, we have gold. You have 20,000 cattle, and we have 40,000. You have this, you have that. So the Brazilians were saying, we have more money than you. And you fought, and you won the British. We are fighting the Portuguese, little softer than the British. So if you just give us a help, we can create the Americas together. The Americans gave us a lot of stimulus and said, let's go ahead, let's dream together, let's be together. Then, when the final hour came, the Portuguese surrounded the group, and then we called the Americans and said, what's going on? Well, listen, it's very tough, the fight against the British, and we cannot fight the continent at the same time. So we'll see you in the future. In the future, we are here. Invite you again for a partnership. We are inviting you again for a partnership. This time you are swinging and dancing with the Chinese. The Chinese want to dance with us, and they dance very well. They are our #1 partner today, trading partner, which is incredible because we are so close, we are complementary, we are very similar, but we trade more with the Chinese, and they want to invest there. And President loves America, I love America, but I always tell the President, love them, but let me trade with whoever is more profitable to us. Because this is the way Americans dance too. They've been dancing with the Chinese for a long time. The Chinese have been financing the last 15 years growth here, stealing jobs, but financing overconsumption. So now is the time of truth for you guys. That's why Trump was elected. And it's the time of truth for us too. So we are here to open our markets unilaterally. It's not begging or helping or, no, we want to be close, but we'll do our move unilaterally, which is in the sense of seeking higher grounds on all directions. So first, Social Security. Second, privatization, aggressive. So we are open for business. If you go there, you can buy real estate, you can buy things. We'll be open for business. You can help to finance our railroads. You can go for concessions. We've been talking about oil and gas in Brazil. It's the largest world frontier, efficient, easy, and measured around 500 billion to almost $1 trillion in the next 10 to 12 years. Present value of the extraction. So, and we are selling, last Friday we sold 14 airports, all sold for private management, all foreign companies from all over. 3-4 months from now, we'll be selling oil, the pre-salt. We are open for business there, and we think we need these investments, these private investments. There'll be everybody there, Chinese, Americans, Norwegian, UK, all over the world, people going there. We are a frontier, a growth frontier in a world that is decelerating. The world is decelerating, and probably this thing will take some time. It's like you are going to rehab, we are just getting out of rehab. So we are out of sync. It happened before. We are always out of sync because it is a continental dimension economy. We have our own internal dynamics. If we do the proper job, our own homework, we'll grow because we are a relatively closed economy. It is a shame. Brazil is the 8th largest economy in the world and is 129 in ease of doing business, 126 in degree of openness. So it's a closed economy, stagnated, with a swollen public sector, centralized, and we know we have to move in the other direction. As we move in the other direction, we are going to grow. Brazil in the past century was the fastest growing economy in the world for 3/4 of the past century. Brazil used to grow for 75 years in a row, average 7.4%, more than Japan, more than Korea, more than everybody else. And then we got the sickness of state-driven economy that derailed, with the best intentions, even the military government that were very focused on trying to create infrastructure, and almost derailed our democracy. That proved itself resilient, vibrant, enough, voting every 2 years. We went to hyperinflation without eating horses. When you go through the numbers of the hyperinflation in Germany, month after month, we ate 10,000 horses, 8,000 horses, 3,000 horses, no horses left. Brazil went to 2 hyperinflations, not one horse was eaten that I know of. So it's a very gentle people, faced financial stresses, voting every 2 years, chose a liberator now with a political alliance of center and right, will deliver, because in less than 60 days, 2 very important things were done, and airports being privatized. A problem we had with oil in the last 2-3 years, we could not extract more oil because the minister of A was fighting minister of B. We are all a family. We have a notion of a mission. Nobody is there to get wealthy. Nobody is there to get famous. We are there to fulfill a mission and get back home. Nobody's sticking to power. The president himself says, listen, if you make a reform, I don't even care about being reelected. If we do the job in 4 years, 4 years. If you need me for 8 years, 8 years. But the thing is, get the job done. So we are very enthusiastic about it. It's not what you read in the newspapers here. You have an entirely different, because you've been talking to the losers there. So the establishment media says, well, it's very dangerous. Paulo Guedes wants to sell everything. The president is a very rough man because he says you cannot steal anymore. You cannot stop robbing the Brazilian people. So we are very committed to this. I was telling you of Social Security, privatization, tax reform. We have more than 50 taxes. We'll collapse this whole thing into 5, 6, 7 tax, like any ordinary tax system. So we welcome very much the roadmap to a U.S.-Brazil tax treaty. Maybe this will look complex to us 5 years from now. Maybe we'll look at your tax system and say, you have too many taxes. Let's see. And we welcome also the roadmap to a trade agreement, because we will open the economy. We will open the economy. I know, and I had 2 meetings today with Lighthizer and Wilbur Ross. I know that it looks like crazy. You, in the midst of a global trade war, are you really serious about opening the economy with a trade war? Everybody trying to steal jobs of everybody else. I said, listen, we've been sleeping for the last 20 years. And you opened your economies, you integrated your economies, you have been growing for a long time. Now, if you, out of excesses, develop overproduction here and there, okay, take a rest for a while. We are just awakening. We feel if we open a little bit our economy, we'll get a lot of mileage and we'll grow faster. So we know what we have to do, we'll do it. Of course, if someone is offering a better deal here, we go, but we will trade. So we told Mercosur that ideology was keeping the economies closed, stagnant, so we told the Argentinians, listen, if you want to sell us our wine, your wine, sell wine, we sell you milk, but if you don't sell, we sell our milk elsewhere, and we don't buy your wine, but we follow. So move fast, because we'll move fast. We told the same thing to the Paraguayans have a very cheap energy with us at Itaipu, around Itaipu, so it's an easier conversation. Here we have some tough conversation because Lighthizer thinks we are Chinese. We are not Chinese. We have a trade deficit with you guys. The Chinese have a surplus with you. So he's kind of tough. I told him, listen, tough with tough. If you want to sell pork, I'll sell you beef. If you want to sell ethanol, get my sugar. If you don't want anything, no problem. There's sugar all over the world, people willing to have sugar. So we are ready for any dance, but we will dance. President will be with President Trump tomorrow. I think Ernesto, our Minister of Foreign Relationships, they know that geopolitically we are Western world. We are democracies. We know where we are. We know who we are, who inspires us. And it's you guys. But we've been seeing you trading with the Chinese for decades. Why can't we? You know who has most direct investment here? The Chinese too. So why can't we trade with these guys? Why can't we allow them to invest in infrastructure, to make a railroad, so that instead of having our soybean going south, going to Antarctica, and then going all through the Pacific, why not go north, cross the channel, Panama Channel, and get cheaper there? Today, our steel, with our iron ore, to get out of the south of Brazil and go to northeast, gets there double the cost of going to China, iron ore, becoming steel through the channel, and getting to northeast of Brazil. It's not reasonable. It is the cost of logistics. It is the cost of lack of competition. So we must get these investments in infrastructure. We will reduce the cost of Brazil. We will simplify the tax, and then we will open the economy. So this is there's no genius work. It's just ordinary business. We are ready for that. And our conversation here is, number one, please help us to get in OECD. Because this is how you get to the major league, to the first league. And then you enforce standards of public policy, of accountability, of taxes, and trade agreements. So we need help to go to the first league. Incredibly, the US is the only obstacle from us joining. And it's comprehensible, because we were jumping on the left leg all the time. So we understand that. But now we are jumping on the right leg. So we didn't deserve the same treatment we had before. But if not, no problem. We go ahead. And so at the first level, president to president, ambassador to ambassador, we want bilateral agreements. We want promotion to the first league globally. That's what we want. At the corporate level, this is the government level. At the corporate level, we just, this afternoon, talking to Wilbur Ross, we reestablished the idea of having 15 largest U.S. companies that deal with Brazil and the 15 largest Brazilian companies that have deals with the U.S. Let's put these guys to talk together and talk about future. We just had a merger of Boeing and Embraer, a wonderful thing for both sides. And we can have more and more and more. If we merge these things, America is just one big market for those transnational companies. I think this is a very effective way of cooperating and creating the network in the liberal democracies of the Western world. Also in technology, like we just saw people signing here, the agreements. So these great trade agreements, tax agreements, promotion to the first league, we expect support from you, America. On the corporate level, this cooperation. And finally, the tip for tap, which is really not serious. It cannot be the thing that will separate us. When I sell pork, okay, buy my beef. When I sell ethanol, buy my sugar. Because I can make your sugar is your ethanol is from corn, which is cheaper. So I have ethanol from sugar. It's more expensive. Well, of course, sell me this, but let me then transform my jobs, employment, and production that use it to be ethanol. If I'm being outcompeted by your ethanol, which is corn, okay, let me at least export my sugar. So beef for pork, sugar for ethanol, wheat for auto parts, that is important for us, wheat is important for you. This is the little things. This is, Lighthizer is there with a list, must cut here, must cut there, must cut there. I say, okay, so cut here, cut there, cut there. Don't cut here, okay, don't cut there. So this is not the serious thing. The real tough thing is thinking we are strategic partners for the future. Thank you.